I'm Marianna Grossman. I'm the Executive Director of Sustainable Silicon Valley, and I have the pleasure of moderating this great panel. We're going to be talking about net positive energy, and Sustainable Silicon Valley has a new initiative we started last fall that we call Net Positive Bay Area that includes energy, water, and also carbon. And so we'll be focusing on the energy part of that today, but I want to give you a little bit of background about what we mean by net positive, and then we have these other awesome panelists. And after I speak, Brad Liljequisr, who's the technical director for the Net Zero Energy Building and Living Community Challenge for the International Living Futures Institute, will talk about their definition of net positive and some of the great work they're doing with Living Building Challenge, Living Communities Challenge, and their net zero projects, and kind of setting the context for going beyond LEED as a way of thinking about buildings. There's plenty of room down here. Don't be shy. I don't want to see anyone standing in the back. It'll be a lot more fun if you're closer so we can have more of a conversation. The next speaker is going to be David Kaneda, who's a managing principal of the Integral Group, and they do amazing work with electrical engineering and building design, and he's going to talk about some of his net positive buildings, some buildings that we're aiming at being net zero that actually perform better than that, and show that it's possible. I had a professor named Kenneth Boulding who said, if it exists, it must be possible, and David is the proof of that. And then the next speaker will be Archelle Funnié. He is a commissioner on the Environmental Planning Commission for the City of East Palo Alto, and Sustainable Silicon Valley is partnering with that city to work on helping it become a net positive city. He'll talk about some of the challenges and opportunities in doing that. And then the final speaker will be Dian Grueneich, who's a senior research scholar here at Stanford at the Precourt Energy Efficiency Center. And she also is a former commissioner on the California Public Utilities Commission. So she's going to give an overview on the policy side of kind of what are the issues, what are ways that policy can help move towards net positive, and what are some of the impediments that might be in the way that we need to overcome. And then we're going to try to keep our presentations relatively brief so that there's going to be some time at the end for your questions and comments. And there is a microphone here, and it will be probably helpful for people if you would come up to the mic when you want to ask a question. That way also it will get, the audio will be able to be recorded for whoever is not here and wanting to participate. So a couple of comments on net positive. Well, first of all, Sustainable Silicon Valley, for those of you who don't know, is a consortium that is collaborating with Stanford on putting on this conference. And we have all kinds of partners in the corporate side, and government, and academia, and other nonprofit organizations working together to solve problems that we can't solve alone. And one of those big challenges is that the impacts of climate change include really disrupting the hydrological system. And in California, that looks like drought. And I'm predicting there'll be periodic deluges of extreme rain, but we'll have, I think, a very dry future overall, especially as climate warms up and the snowpack goes away. And that's really our main, about 2/3 of our water supply comes from the Sierra snowpack. So having that go away, and that we have somebody here from the Forest Service, and also they can attest to our forests burning up much more readily because of the heat and the dryness and the lack of rain, but also the general changes of our climate system. So we're conducting this massive experiment, and our feeling at Sustainable Silicon Valley is we need to take action. So, and the action is really a big sea change from what we do now. So not just a little incremental change from business as usual, and that's why we decided to call what we're doing net positive, because we thought there's never going to be enough FEMA money to recover from all the disasters that we'll be facing as a nation and as a world as years go forward. But if we have a common vision of what we're going for, then we can make the proper investments now in sea level rise protection, in water systems, in energy systems, so that we can phase out of fossil fuels and reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. So our goal for 2050 is to generate more renewable energy than we use, and especially net positive buildings can generate enough energy to be able to power electric vehicles as well as to power themselves, to sequester more carbon than we emit, and to use only local water resources, all by 2050. And those are all very high hurdles, but we feel that they're really necessary. So we're focused on action-oriented projects that can move that forward, and some of those projects will be discussed by some of our speakers today. So the current main things we're working on is net positive East Palo Alto. We're working on on-site water reuse. San Francisco has an ordinance that we're trying to bring down to San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. And then we also are helping support the San Francisco Bay Area Super Bowl to be a net positive event on their definition, which is not the 2050 definition, but the 2016 definition of what net positive would look like for an event. So here's our panelists. Our goal for the day is to define net positive energy, to give you some examples, and to look at some policy implications. So I will now turn it over to Brad.
Sorry, Dian.
Here's and I'll just get your slides. Okay. Go ahead, start. Hopefully in your program you have our bios. If you want to, I just want to go into that.
I'll take it from here. It's a little different. Yeah, it's PDF. I'm good. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Real pleasure to be here. I'm down from Seattle, where our institute is headed. How many of you here have heard of the International Living Future Institute and/or the Living Building Challenge? Raise your hand. That's really good. Okay, I'm pleasantly happy about that. So you just never know with depending on the crowd. So I am the technical director at the Institute, and I run, I'm one of several technical directors, and under my portfolio, I run the Net Zero Energy Building Program, as well as the Living Communities Program, because there's obviously some linkages between those. So just to give you kind of a real high level about what the Institute is about, we're an institute based in the Northwest. We have offices in Seattle and Portland. We have staff in San Francisco and Cambridge, Massachusetts as well. We are we're best known for the Living Building Challenge, although we have a number of other programs associated with us. I'm going to talk briefly about a couple of those today. We are born out of an international green building program, which is called the Cascadia Green Building Council. It was basically Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, and Alaska. And in 2007, we launched the Living Building Challenge. And we are a little different from other folks, and we tend to take things to a much more, we're into really kicking butt, basically, if I can just say that. So we get bored easily. We're a little ADD. People think we're kind of airy-fairy, but I tend to think of us as dreamers and doers. We like to really, really think big and radical and actually then do it. And we're actually establishing a fairly decent track record for just that. So philosophically, this graph is pretty important to us. So we're big believers in the net positive vision as well. I think in terms of just worldview, a lot of the world today, or a lot of our interaction with the environment, has tended to focus around kind of a worldview of humanity being pretty bad relative to the environment. Like we're kind of screwed, and if we can just be good enough, maybe it'll turn out okay in the end. I mean, I think that is kind of this underlying paradigm that floats under things for us, and we're actually kind of turning things on its head and saying, well, maybe humanity can actually have a positive interaction with the planet. That if we approach things, all design processes and our future visioning, if we start it from that standpoint, that might be feasible. And there are a lot of examples of that out there. If you look at biohabitat studies, there's certain optimized conditions where biodiversity increases as humanity is there in certain circumstances. And so we're kind of in that camp. So we see net zero energy as kind of the threshold of moving out of the territory of limiting environmental impact and moving more into a positive relationship with the environment. We are moving really quickly right now. We actually have more than one project a week registering with us to pursue the Living Building Challenge, which is, again, our core building kind of design and certification program. We have 275 projects that are currently working on the Living Building Challenge. And we've definitely hit in that we're on that sweet spot of the curve. I mean, this slide is from April, and we've added 25 projects that have jumped on, and some of them are actually really quite big. We have two Fortune 500 companies that are working with us on very major facilities. We're under NDA on those, so I can't talk about those. Isn't that great when you can say that? It's just like, I can't talk about it, it's a secret. So just to give you a very high level of what we're about, and I'm going to just be focusing on net zero energy, and I'm just going to blaze through some examples of projects there. But what we're bringing to the table is an integrated vision. You know, and I'll be honest with you, a little bit of the discussion today to me has been, it's both awesome, but also kind of like, you know, it's kind of like, we got to do more than just replace internal combustion engines with batteries and electric motors. I mean, there's more to it than that. I mean, thinking of our future vision of humanity, one that is more integrated with nature, one that takes into account water resources, one that takes into account health, biophilia, beauty, equity, all those sorts of things. So we're at least trying to start to create a matrix around all those things and really radically pushing the envelope in all those areas. I mean, my starting question, my debate, today would have been, what's the future of the car, not how we're propelling the car. So, and there's a big, huge debate about that. I mean, you know, in urban areas, cars are dying off. You know, talk to a 28-year-old, and we have 10 folks under 30 in the office, and one of them owns a car. So it's like the changes are already coming. Net positive energy. Okay, so one of our standards is a requirement for net positive energy. And what we mean by that is that a building, or it could be a community, basically harvests as much energy as it uses over the course of a year. And we have kind of two little minor subtleties to that. We have, if you're coming in under the full Living Building Challenge, we actually ask you to be net positive, so you generate actually a little bit of extra energy beyond what you use. And that you actually provide a little bit of energy storage as kind of a resiliency measure as well, to operate things when the chips are down a little bit and take advantage of some of the new battery technologies. So we also have a standalone net zero energy certification. It is a verified program, so one of the ways that we work is we actually don't, we get, again, kind of bored reviewing people's studies, so we have kind of moved the conversation to, you actually have to prove your performance. There's lots of people who like to talk about being net zero energy, and in actual fact, the number of buildings that actually get there with 12 months of data that establishes that they're performing, that they're generating as much as they're using, it's not that many. And so that's what we look at the bills, and we have a third-party auditor and come out and just kind of do a sniff test on the project and make sure that it's real. And then I'm just going to show you some of those projects. So this is one of them. How many of you guys have heard of the Bullitt Center up in Seattle? Raise your hand. If you're in Seattle, you got to go see this building. It's pretty radical. It is, you know, you look at it, it's a 6-story Class A office building. It was built for competitive price. This was $50 per square foot less than the Gates Foundation building, and it harvests all its own electricity, it harvests all its own water, it composts everything on site. It's an amazing space to work in. There's no toxins in the environment. And it's great to work in. And I work there too. So, and just, you see how invigorated I am? It's kind of amazing. So I just want to give you a sense, you know, one of the missing, and I'm going to be quick here. One of the missing pieces, or an important piece in the conversation, is this is not just about solar panels. I mean, conservation, if we're really serious about driving down our loads, conservation is really critical, and the notion of net zero energy is really important. So if this was a typical office building in Seattle with a typical EUI, that's how big the array on the building would need to be. That's under the current Seattle Energy Code, which is the most stringent energy code in the United States. That's a LEED Platinum building taking all 22 or whatever points it is in LEED. And that's what we actually built. And when I say we actually were very involved in the development of this project and the design of it. So I'm just going to wrap up and just show you, these are a bunch of buildings that are carbon neutral right now. I mean, I really appreciated what Secretary Schultz was saying today. That's right on the money. Like 2050 goals, sorry, some of us won't even be here by then. You know, the reality is let's do stuff right now. And these are all buildings that are performing with net zero carbon impact on the planet. So I'm just going to show them to you. They're on our website. Please go look at the case studies. We're in the process of writing a net zero energy case study book right now that will be released this fall. And these are, you know, these are kind of initial projects. I want to really do a shout out for DPR. They're on their 3rd net zero energy retrofit. They have a 3-story office building in San Francisco, just up from the waterfront, that's in its observation period right now. That's David's office building on the right. Big pioneer right over here. And then we have we like challenges, so this is a net zero energy challenge. So we have a matrix, climate zones by building type. You could be the first on the graph. You know, you guys are temperate climate. It's the easiest one, so it's filling in first. And then I'm just going to wrap with just 2 minutes on why, you know, what is net zero energy? Why is it important? And I want to emphasize to folks, net zero energy is about getting people excited about stuff. You know, so I developed this project before I joined the Institute. This is a 10-unit townhome community called Z Home in Issaquah, Washington. We sold it for about a 20% price premium per square foot over the baseline area. It was a semi-premium product, but you know, sold it on the open market, just a market rate development project. And as part of it, we used it as kind of a gee whiz, come check out what the future will bring in carbon neutral housing, you know, leave your fossil fuel guilt behind. And it's amazing, you know, people get excited about this stuff. We were on the front page of the Seattle Times twice. We got a lot of great national media. I mean, this is starting to taper off as we do more, but it's still definitely there. And we had 10,000 people visit a townhome community. I mean, it's just like, why? You know, it's like totally boring. Who wants to go to the burbs and visit townhomes? And, you know, we had all these people from Seattle do it. So, and then, you know, we're really working to catalyze the future. This is Santa Monica City Hall. The council just appropriated funding to kind of proceed with pursuing full living building challenge on their new wing to this building. So we're really excited to be working down here in California. Then one last final slide, a plug. So we kind of share some net positive branding with Sustainable Silicon Valley. We've had actually 2 conferences that we've done in the Bay up in San Francisco. We're doing our 3rd. It's focused on energy and water issues. It'll be in February 18th and 19th down in San Diego, and we'd like to see you guys there. So that is it for me.
David Kaneda is next, if I can get these slides. Okay. Help. Somebody help me. Who's my helper? How do we get PowerPoint back? Okay, so we want to close this. Okay, here we go. Here's Kaneda. This is a Mac person trying to do a PC. Then anybody who wants to study good design, this is a proof of it. No. Sorry.
Oh, thanks. So as you can see, Brad and I coordinated, so we have the same logo up here. This is actually their net positive logo from what, last year or the year before?
Last year.
So I thought it was appropriate, but this is actually ILFI's logo. Since Sustainable Silicon Valley is focused on energy and water. So I got a ton of slides, so I'm going to talk pretty fast because I only have 10 minutes. I did it in 10 minutes at 2 o'clock in the morning this morning. So I think it should work. So I'm going to talk quickly about just 3 main topics. One is zero energy in the Bay Area. So it's like, you know, probably people know about one, maybe two buildings, but there's actually, it's starting to become pretty common. There's a lot of zero energy buildings in the Bay Area. First, this is my firm. We're mostly in the US, but in Canada and the UK, we have about 330 employees. I am a managing principal in the San Jose office, and we do a lot of net zero energy buildings, including DPR and Packard and some of the ones that you mentioned. I'm going to just fly through these. I'm going to talk about like two of these buildings. These are all except one are local Bay Area buildings. So this is actually my house. It's positive energy because I just bought an i3, which I am not. Electric cars are hard for me, so we could talk about that later. But so we do there's zero energy residences out there in the Bay Area. There's a ton of school buildings that are zero energy in the Bay Area. All these projects in San Jose, several of them are in San Jose, one's in Marin. This is PVs on every high school in Campbell Union High School District. Net zero energy campuses. Two campuses up in Oakland, the Exploratorium, our office, the Cliff Bar's headquarters in Emeryville. This one's really interesting, so I'm going to stop on this. This is a kind of cheap piece of junk, tilt-up construction remodel in Sunnyvale called 435 India. And the thing that's interesting about it, it's gotten a lot of attention because the guy that developed it is a for-profit developer. So he wasn't just doing this to be, it's like when we did my building, it was like a charity. I'm losing money on it because it's pretty expensive to do back in 2005. But the guy that did this, they moved into it last year. He developed it as a spec remodel. And he said, I'm not going to do it if I don't think I'm going to make money at it. And so we did it. He made money at it, or at least he thinks he did. And I always joke around with people and say, if it was me and I didn't make money at it, I'd lie about it. Say, oh yeah, we made money. But in fact, I know he made money at it because this building right next door is under construction and it's net zero. And this building we're in design on that's about half a block away. So this kind of investment group is continuing to do these buildings because they think they can make money at them. This building has a lab in it, and it's net zero. And this is the one building that's not in the Bay Area. This is a DNA research lab in San Diego, and it's net zero. So it's not that hard to do this kind of work. An MOB, Packard Foundation, you heard about.
Are those Sunnyvale buildings, were they pre-leased or were those developed on spec?
They're developed on spec, and they ended up, one of the reasons they made money is they leased them out way faster than they thought they would at a higher lease rate than they thought they would. And we're starting to do some pretty big projects that are targeting net zero and in some cases microgrids. So this is a development that's just kind of being planned right now right across from Levi Stadium. And then this is the new Richmond campus for UC Berkeley, which they want to develop as a microgrid. Okay, so part two. I just want to quickly go through zero energy buildings are actually not that hard to design. So there's basically four things you need to think about. Kind of the envelope of the building, making it tight, and so there's not a lot of energy loss and energy transfer through the skin of the building. Kind of an efficient HVAC system to keep it warm or cool depending on what time of the year it is. Natural light as much as possible and efficient lighting so you don't waste a lot of electricity on the lights. Controlling the plug-in equipment, because on a really high efficiency building, that's the biggest energy use in an office building. And then the last thing, of course, is offsetting the energy use with photovoltaic. So just a couple slides on each. The building skin, a lot of that is choosing glass carefully and looking at where you place your glass and protecting it, keeping the solar gain out, and then insulating the building well. From thermal comfort, so, sometimes we're doing simple things with cheap, kind of like the junky air conditioning systems that a lot of times we try not to use, but sometimes it's just being smart about how you zone things. So in this case, we're cooling each side of the building with a separate piece of equipment, so you can, so you're not cooling the east side when the sun comes up and the north side, and then having to reheat the north side because it's zoned to the same side as the east side. That's actually pretty commonly done, surprisingly, in the Bay Area. And then decoupling heating and cooling from air movement, so you can cool people down just by moving air and actually let the temperatures ride up and down slightly. And then illumination, key thing is trying to let daylight in, so you don't have to turn the electric lights on. So this is a building in Colorado that you can see the only lights on, or there's, does this have a laser on it? No, maybe not. So right there's some lights on in the back, but other than that, all the lights are off in this building. It's a 60-foot wide building, all day lit from the sides. And then when you do use electric lights, use really efficient lights. And nowadays, that means that's code for LEDs, because LEDs are getting more efficient than fluorescent. And then the last thing from the load standpoint is looking at the plug-in equipment. So how many people here have like a DVR? So do you know how much energy it uses?
1,000 watts.
No. It's like 30 watts, 35 watts when it's turned on, right? So I took my DVR and I plugged it into a meter to see how much it used, and this is 35 watts. So then I turned it off and I measured it again, and it was 30 watts. So it never turns off, basically. It's 24 hours a day, right? So it actually uses more energy than my dishwasher and my refrigerator and my washing machine and stuff like that, because it's 24 hours a day. So looking at those plug loads and figuring out how to reduce them is actually a really big thing. And like I said, in a lot of office buildings, that's the biggest piece of, or the biggest energy use in the building. And then after that, what you have left, you figure out ways to turn it off. And what you turn off depends on kind of what you have. Then the last thing is the photovoltaic. So you want to size a PV system that will offset your energy use. And the important thing here is the cost has just been dropping through the floor. So now you can do stuff like this that you could never do before, and put PVs in places where it doesn't necessarily make tons of sense, because it's cheap. And so the math starts looking better and better. And the only problem is when you're talking net positive energy, right now the way the billing system is set up, you actually get down to a zero bill before you get to net zero energy even. So one of the big problems is that if you really want to get people to do positive energy, we need to look at how the billing rates work and how you get your money back for the investment. So what's in the future? Technology is going crazy. There's so much innovation in the Silicon Valley in energy efficiency in buildings. So this is electrochromic glass. You can see that glass getting darker there. Company in Milpitas is making it, another company in Minnesota. The codes are getting super strict. So California's coming up with stricter codes. I'm on a committee that just made recommendations to the federal government to go down to zero energy. We talked about this at lunch. This community choice energy is going to make a big impact on energy use in the building. And then monitoring is a huge issue because looking at seeing how it's like driving a Prius, right? If you can see how you're doing, you'll try to do better. There's even some interesting stuff. Penn State came out with a game to help you save energy. So if you save energy, then the chickens get healthy and lay eggs, and you can do things with them. If you waste energy, the chickens actually get green and die. So Brad talked about some of these standards. There's a lot of new standards coming out. So I think those are the big moves. And then the last thing is, are we talking buildings or are we talking community? So there's a real discussion, this community choice aggregation. I really want to talk to those people because there's some conflicts between what the state's trying to do with net zero energy and what CCA is trying to do with kind of aggregating power and how the rates work and things like that. So, and of course batteries is becoming an issue because now that we have storage, then we're able to store that power because that generation doesn't always happen when we need the energy, and so we need to balance those things. And last is figuring out transportation. So that got talked about earlier, so I'm not going to really go into that. But maybe one answer is not having electric cars. Maybe one answer is mass transit, right? And so I really think that's the answer. Okay.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, Archelle's going to be next. Do we have the setup?
Oh, that's pretty funny.
What?
I just read it. I like that.
I got that one.
Okay.
That looks like a Peter Ramsey thing.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I have even less time than Brad and David. Use a mic, yeah. I have less time than Brad and David. I'm a planning commissioner for the city of East Palo Alto, and I wanted to give you a different spin on the conversations thus far as a partner working with Sustainable Silicon Valley. There you go. There you go. So let's look at creating Vista 2035. So what happened in the 1990s, East Palo Alto did a general plan and they haven't done one since that time until recently. They updated the 2035 and a lot of great things are happening in East Palo Alto now. There's a University Circle, University Plaza, and University Square developments that are taking place. Currently right now, the University Circle Plaza that's taking place today, actually with Sobrato, groundbreaking on a huge facility that's going to open up by the end of next year. East Palo Alto is a vibrant community. It's at the base of the Dumbarton, all the way up to Stanford on University Avenue. I feel like it's at the epicenter of Silicon Valley, and Google on one end and Facebook on the other end. We have strong corporate neighbors of IKEA, Sobrato's in there, Facebook nearby, and Home Depot. And recently, I just found out the other day that Home Depot put in a fuel cell to help with renewable energy, which is a very big deal for a big company like Home Depot in East Palo Alto. So we're interested in the same things that you are: energy, water, and carbon, and how can we improve it in our city. And so these are some potential projects that we can do with cool roofs and green roofs and renewable energy in our public buildings. Some other opportunities is the net positive, which we're working with in East Palo Alto, to achieve our 12.0 housing element, which is an element that we have in our general plan. We're focused to increase efficiency and reduce our costs, and we want to bring a higher quality of living to our citizens in East Palo Alto. And also bring green employment opportunities. One of the problems with being in East Palo Alto is that we not have the opportunity to have someone like an advocate who can foster a lot of the renewable energy. So it's dependent on the Planning Commission, like myself, to take that banner and work with it, work with Silicon Valley. Moving forward, we have formalized a relationship with Sustainable Silicon Valley. The key is identifying stakeholders in the city beside myself so we can work with them, and developing a working group inside the city, and so we can secure other partners as well. What are the challenges? You can't do a one-size-fit-all in East Palo Alto. You really need to tailor it for the demographics that are there. The demographics is very wide and large, multicultural. We also want to have marketing plans that focus towards that city. Hub source is like putting marketing plans where people will see it, where people can engage and interact. Making sure the collateral is directed towards the residents and gaining partnership and recognition in the communities. And provide a good image with our utilities partners. It must be collaborative. It can't just be, you know, one utility company coming in and working with. We have to work with everyone in the city. And we need to have hired staff. That's the problem, so we can have environmental justice and green and efficiency programs. These are some of the projects I know Marianna's working with the Ecumenical Society. We have great concerns for our marshlands there on the baylands there. We also have the new Sobrato facility. That's going to be your new entryway into the city of East Palo Alto by the end of next year. And we do have a LEED Gold building in East Palo Alto. The YMCA of the peninsula is a LEED Gold building, and this is also will have renewable and energy efficiency. So it's pretty exciting times in East Palo Alto, and we want to keep going at it. I'm here today to really learn a lot about it. I've learned a lot. I wish I was in Seattle. There's some great things going on there. I was really in the Z model. I think it was the Z, the housing. Yeah. It's beautiful, excellent. So, you know, as we continue to build in East Palo Alto, the hope is that we can be much more involved in renewable energy in the city.
That's a little tricky up there. It's a weird test.
Like it. Yeah.
All right, great.
Okay, here's my clicker. Hi, I'm Dian Grueneich, and I was a commissioner at the California Public Utilities Commission for 6 years and was the lead on energy efficiency, very excited and involved with zero net energy. And there's lots of different terms, net zero energy, zero net energy, net positive. And for whatever reason, at least the terminology that I ended up using was zero net energy. So, but basically, while there may be some nuances, we're all in the same sphere. I have the great honor now of being here at Stanford and working specifically on a project that's trying to think through the next level of energy efficiency. And certainly one component of where we're going in efficiency is this whole concept of zero net energy. I want to just, before I get into the slides, do a real shout out for what I heard today, because you can make a building net positive, zero net energy, zero net, if you just throw on a lot of solar PV. And this was the first time that I've seen that slide set, but I want to grab it and use it in the future, because you saw the tremendous difference of how much solar PV you actually need in a building, depending upon what the energy use is within that building. And quite frankly, because of some of the ways that subsidies are set up and rates are set up, there actually is more subsidies going towards putting solar PV on buildings than doing energy efficiency, especially when you're getting net energy metering. On the other hand, the modeling that's been done that's looking at where we need to go for deep carbon emission reductions and getting to some of our goals 2050, where we're going to be 80% below our 1990 levels, those tell us that it is simply not an economical situation to have a game plan where we're just throwing solar PVs on every building that we can think about, because you basically have to reduce the energy usage in a building in order to then have enough savings and have your electric needs shrink enough that you can go to the other carbon emission reductions. And again, this gets back to a lot of the complexities that are built into how much government subsidies there are, as well as, you know, where technology is going. But I think all of us are in agreement when we're talking about this area. Solar PV is a very important concept, not just in the building, but within the community. But your very first step is to think about the building itself and how you can make the energy usage shrink. An area that we're not really touching upon today, but is very important as we're thinking about the future, is the role of natural gas within buildings. That again, when we look to the modeling that's been done on where we need to get to really reduce our carbon emissions, it's telling us pretty clearly that we have to shrink our usage of natural gas to the extent that it continues to have carbon emission reductions. And so a big element that is starting to emerge and being thought about is for the buildings themselves, are we moving towards basically electrification of as many uses as possible within a building? What emphasis are we giving on really making sure the equipment in the building that uses natural gas is absolutely as efficient as possible? So again, we didn't have time to talk about it today, but that I think is one of the most important things that's going to be emerging as we think about not just zero net energy, but really zero net carbon emissions as well. So I'm going to now just quickly run through some of the policy settings. We thought it would be more interesting, instead of the typical start off with the policy and then you actually figure out what's going on in the world, to get you excited about these beautiful buildings and seeing what's going on. So we are, in my mind, very fortunate. We live in the nation state of California. Not only do we believe in climate change, but we're committed to having basically all hands on board for addressing climate change. And we have been leaders on energy efficiency. I actually worked in Sacramento in the first Jerry Brown administration on the first round of Title 24, the first round of appliance standards, and couldn't be more thrilled that we have Jerry Brown back in office and leading us ahead even more on energy efficiency. That in January he announced that the state of California, one of our goals is to double the efficiency in our existing buildings through 2030. And that doesn't just mean that by 2030 we're going to be doing double. It means each and every year, starting this year, we're going to be doubling our goals. And we thought our goals were pretty aggressive before, but that tells us that a key component of where the state's going on energy efficiency is really towards retrofitting the existing buildings down to zero net energy. And this is where you can see he said the state and nation must be aggressive about setting goals such as having zero net energy residential buildings by 2020 and commercial buildings by 2030. And this is when I was a commissioner. Some of you have heard this story. I went to Europe on a study trip on energy efficiency, and I was in the UK meeting with government officials the day that they released the goals in the UK for zero net energy in new homes by 2025. I came back, I was so excited, I said, well, we don't need to wait to 2025, let's do it by 2020. So I had the very great opportunity when I was at the commission. We put together a strategic plan because I felt very strongly that California needed to really have a game plan of where we were going with efficiency. We currently have about $1 billion a year of programs that are funded off charges on our electric and natural gas bills. So 10 years, that's $10 billion. With the 8th largest economy in the world, we can really move markets. And so we put in the plan as aspirational goals. I felt that at that time, and this was 7 years ago, we didn't have enough experience with zero net energy to say, let's put it in a law. But it's aspirational that our new construction, zero net energy by 2030, and that is saying it would actually be in a building code. When you build a building, it's got to be zero net energy. For new residential construction, zero net energy by 2020. 2020. And then because we have so many existing buildings for carbon emission purposes, while new construction is important, what absolutely matters is what are we doing with our existing buildings? And that's, of course, a little bit trickier to figure out the cost effectiveness and how you go in. But we have a goal of 50% of existing buildings retrofit to Z&E by 2030. So one of my great joys in life is that I worked very hard with lots of people and we got this out. And it was like, I actually thought when I left the commission, I'd never hear about it again. It's like, oh, this was taken seriously, which is delightful and very necessary. But it's really so inspirational to realize that we had this vision in our mind that we should be doing it. And now you see it's really catching on as a lot of momentum. And the state is very much committed with this whole community around it of, we're going to meet these goals, and I think we will. So real quickly, we've got in our state buildings the whole idea of leading by example, huge efforts going on to make them leaders in this whole area. And I was at a workshop in Sacramento on Z&E about a month ago, and it was specifically people who either are state employees working on the operational side of the buildings or architects, et cetera. And there were probably 30 people in the room, and every one of them was saying, within my agency, we're looking for an opportunity to do Z&E, or we've done one. And we never would have seen that 5 years ago. So I really am seeing this as this is the wave of the future. We have a state law, AB 758, that has got a draft plan release that's what's the game plan in California on our existing buildings. It has a huge emphasis on zero net energy retrofits. We're going to be establishing a leadership commitment campaign and performance awards and really making it a centerpiece of where we're going in California. And just to close out, we have in California about $500 million a year, $2.5 billion to really focus on decreasing the energy usage in our schools. And one of the things that I worked on with many other people was I thought, well, this is a terrific place to embed within that program a whole zero net energy effort. And so it's being the CPUC directed our utilities to launch a deep plan. We've put up the website and they are out actively soliciting pilots, and then the idea is they're going to build a community of interest around the different pilot programs they're doing so that we can really learn and understand how on a large scale effort we can make our schools in California showcases in this area. So that's it on the policy level. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you. We have time just for a couple of questions. So anyone have a question, please use the microphone. So, okay,
hi, Tom Geist from EPRI, not out of Palo Alto, but out of Knoxville, Tennessee. Thank you very much. I did have a question. We're working with utilities actually all over the country, and they're very interested in the low income and serving that sector. And so I just was wondering what your thoughts were on that. Is it too early? Are we able to do anything? And what does the future look like?
I'll take that. Well,
go.
Do you want it? So there's a firm in San Jose called First Community Housing that's done, one of their projects got a code top 10 like 2008 or something like that. And most of their projects are LEED Platinum, and now they're starting to go for zero energy, and they're low income housing. So it's doable. It's like no big thing.
We actually have the Institute, we have an Affordable Housing Innovators Group, and there are about 15 affordable housing providers in that, some of them quite large, actually. And we've actually just released a study, it's on our website, which is living-future.org, that looks actually at net zero energy and net zero water for affordable projects around the country, costs, what's involved, those sorts of things. And yeah, I think we're going to see a lot in that area. I will just say really quickly, with cost structure in particular, there's something really compelling about it, because a lot of those projects, I mean, they're getting tax credits, but a lot of the times they're being developed with bond financing, and the finances on something that is being financed through the bond is it's usually cash flow positive to build to a net positive standard. So.
The reason we're working in a lower income community is because the people can really benefit from the energy savings. And if you think about waste, eliminating waste is really what you're doing. You're eliminating wasted energy, wasted water, and wasted money. So there's no reason to not make it available to lower income people too.
And durability and healthy materials, and I mean, it makes a lot of sense, actually.
Next
Hi.
question.
Diana Genova, I'm here at Stanford University. My question actually is on how we can look at the bigger picture instead of just looking at the building, or if it does. So I work in transportation, and my question is, to me, it's not beneficial to have a net zero building in the middle of nowhere that everybody has to drive to. Is there a way that this is incorporated in some of the awards or in the systems that you look at?
Yeah, I want to let Brad take that first.
So we actually, there's a reason why I run the Living Community and the Net Zero program, both. And we're absolutely starting to knit those together. I mean, we have actually, if you go to the website, you'll see our Living Communities section, but we're starting to take deep dive looks at things at the community scale, and not, because there's just a whole, it just ties together so many things. There's the mobility factor. There's the ability to just get communal action going on, which is really huge. You get a catalytic project within a city, and that just changes the tone for everything. So there's a lot of ways that that's critical.
I'm actually working on I mentioned I was working with GSA, the federal government. They're trying to come up with a metric for exactly what you're talking about. So they mentioned the Chesapeake Bay Institute, which was LEED Platinum, but out in the middle of nowhere, and you have to drive far to get there. And so they're trying to come up with EUI is kind of the energy efficiency of the building. They're also trying to come up with a second metric about, the location of the building and the transportation, with the hope that people will look at that and say, you know what, this is a bad location. We need to be closer to a city center or to a mass transit route or something.
Great. Next question.
Thank you all for being here. I guess my question is...
Your name, please.
Oh, sorry. My name is Anthony Kinslow. I'm a PhD student here at Stanford. My question is looking at, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there hasn't been a lot of net zero projects focused on low-income communities or schools. And I was curious about the barriers that exist, or if I'm just wrong in that there are a lot targeted towards low income.
I'll grab in that. What's your name?
Anthony.
Anthony. The problem is that they don't know about it. Just literally do not know. There are a ton of programs that are available, but they don't know about it. And one of the things that I'm working on is looking at East Palo Alto, is how can I get in a multicultural community, how can I get that information so that it reaches individual diverse groups? So, and it needs to be marketed, packaged that way, but there is a consolidated group of net zero programs that are available from the federal level. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also do check out First Community Housing. They're doing really great work and proving that the savings they make in the building, they can pass on to things like transportation vouchers for, bus passes and things like that for people.
But I will say you bring up, I think, a point that there's a concept that zero net energy is expensive, hard to do, and that it's really for the elite buildings. And I think that's what we're all committed to trying to change, that concept, because at least what I know, it's not true in reality. But that you definitely have stated what is the perception out there.
Thank you.
And schools actually are one of the places where I see a lot of net zero energy. So, a lot around here. We're working, the state of Hawaii is trying to take all 258 of their public school campuses down to net zero energy. So that's, because they're going to be there for a long time, they have longer investment horizons, and it makes a lot of sense.
I think one of the things we haven't really talked about is the problem between the operating budget and the capital budget. So, for example, we worked on a project before I had the job I have now with Sustainable Schools in Palo Alto, and they were doing all these retrofits. And they do things like put a light sensor behind a bookcase. So the lights go off, the teacher's sitting there, so they'll put a lamp next to their desk. They're just silly things like that, or the window's open and the heat is on. And I think getting people to think holistically about spending a little bit money on the capital money to make improvements so that the operating costs go down, and having those budgets linked. And in the public sector, that's really hard to do. So partly that's where Diane's work comes in, of setting policy to say this shall be done, and then that helps get over that barrier about the operating budget being starved and the capital budget not being able to replenish the operating budget.
Hello, Bob Cormier, Foothill De Anza College District, colleague of David's. Wanted to ask a question with the importance of just the load, the building energy demand. Why not focus on energy use intensity for a current building standard and then ratchet it into the built environment over time and have some other assessment of either building value or building tax based on the amount of total energy that that building's using, rather than just, or in addition to just thinking about how much solar can I put on the building itself.
Diane?
Wait a minute. I thought that was down that area.
No, that was your question.
My excuse is going to be, because that's what it is I was at the CPUC, not the Energy Commission, and they do the building standards. But my general understanding, and my colleagues here actually know more than I do, is that there is at least some thinking going to the concept that you're talking about, and I'm personally very much in favor of it. I think we have a lot to do on the technology side to understand how to make it happen, but at least in California, we've invested billions of dollars in our smart meters. We have an ability to know what's going on in the building, and we know for carbon emission reductions, it's building performance that matters. And so part of my work that I'm doing here of thinking about the next level of energy efficiency is to be talking about that we need a policy framework that isn't focused so much on engineering estimates for particular energy efficiency measures, but instead a whole building approach that's very much oriented towards the performance. And so for me, that's not just new building standards, but existing buildings themselves.
It'd be great to get the real estate profession to buy into that idea too. Right. I'm going to let Mukesh ask the last question. We're really kind of over time, but go ahead and ask it.
Thank you. This is a very quick question, and basically it's an excellent presentation, by the way. There was a recent study that came up in the last few days by DOE that they found for all the homes that did the retrofits, the actual savings for something like 40% of what they were estimated. Have you come across similar type of data in your studies or in your evaluations?
Heck yeah.
So in my prior job, I was one of the people implementing some of the spending related to the ARA grant. And when I heard that on NPR, I just was like, oh, God, you got to be kidding me. But not to trash any programs, but I don't think that that was the most efficient energy efficiency program in history. So seeing how things played out on the ground with that were not great. And I'm a little concerned that that is such a prominent thing out there that people are kind of taking that to the bank, because those numbers are not anywhere close to what is really being delivered on the ground all the time by all sorts of projects. So,
but I think I mean, this came out with USGBC and the LEED certification system also. So one of the things that really was an eye-opener for me is when I started getting into doing these deep energy designs and green buildings and things like that, I was really shocked, because I thought that our industry had kind of figured it out, and kind of when you did these calculations and said you're going to be this energy efficient, we actually would be. Stupid me. It turns out that it's not true at all, and that's why ILFI says I want to see your data, right? Prove it, not show me the calculation that says that it's going to be, because what you find out is that frequently it's not for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's like the people using the building, turn the air conditioning on and then they open the windows and it's 90 degrees out or something like that. There's a lot of reasons for it, but buildings often don't do what they're expected to do, and that's a huge issue for the design community and the facilities management community to figure out how to solve that problem. And I think we're making huge strides, but it's an issue.
So I want to end on a positive note, because I think that the people on this panel represent projects that really do deliver and that show that it can be profitable to do these projects. So don't lose heart. You have to hire really good people to help you do the work, and be careful about people who make claims that are not substantiated. So I guess it's buyer beware, but don't lose heart. There are really great things happening out there, and we want you to spread the word about it. Thank you very much.